All right, hi. So in this video, we're going to put together a few things that you've seen before in other videos and other exercises, and maybe a few things that you haven't, and kind of make a complete layout. And we're going to use a little bit of some different things. So we're going to make a menu that sticks so that when you scroll, the menu will kind of stay at the top, which is kind of cool. We're going to use an SVG image, scalable vector graphics, so that we can scale a logo any size we want. We'll use some Google fonts. We're going to use Flexbox in a little bit of this, which is one way, kind of a newish way. Newish is not a word, I don't think, but it's a newish way to spread things out in single column or a single row. That's kind of what it's best for. So we're going to use Flexbox a little bit. It's kind of good in laying out boxes. That's why it's called Flexbox, I think. And we're also going to hide some stuff. What does that mean? You'll see what I mean when we do that. And we're going to use some more media queries, which I think you've seen already as well. So here's what we're doing here. We're going to go from this page. This is how it starts. This has some of the styles in it already. I didn't have you start from scratch because I didn't want this video to be 6 hours long or anything, like a marathon binge watching on Netflix or anything. So it's got some of the styles in there, but a lot of them are missing. We're going to go from that to this. So we've got a header image up here. We've got our logo up here. This is an SVG file. We've got this little text that overlaid over the background. We've got this navigation bar here with a little bit of animation on it. If we scroll, you can see the navigation will stop at the top. You see I'm scrolling, but it's stopping. That's using CSS positioning sticky, which is kind of a little bit new, newer than some of the other ones anyway. So we scroll down. We've got a couple of columns there. And then down here we've got these little cards, or some people call them cards, pods, modules, 3 little boxes there. So that's great, right? So, well, it's okay. But what we do if we resize this, when it gets to a breakpoint, it changes. So now if we're looking at it kind of on a phone style, the background image has kind of moved around a little bit. Things have resized. The logo's resized. The text has changed size. The navigation went from horizontal to vertical. Now, if you were going to do this for real all the way, you might hide this navigation under a little hamburger menu. People call it a hamburger or something, where you could click on it and it would expand. But this also works, and it doesn't involve any JavaScript or anything super tricky or anything. We're actually using Flexbox for this too. So we've got this the menu is now vertical. If we go down, everything's become vertical, which is pretty typical for a mobile design. And then our Flexbox little container thingies have gone vertical as well. So there's your phone layout, and then if you resize, there's our desktop layout. So that's kind of what we're doing. Oh, and I kind of, yeah, we're also doing kind of a fixed background image here. So when we scroll, you see everything kind of scrolls over the top of it. It doesn't move. And it kind of gets covered up by the content, which is pretty cool. So that is what we're doing. A couple other things we're using. So we're using, like I said, an SVG file. So SVG again stands for Scalable Vector Graphics, which is the reason you might want to use that is because it can be scaled to any size you want, and it stays clean because it's not pixel based. I think you've seen this before probably, but it's not a pixel based image. It is a description of the image, kind of a mathematical description of it. So it's resolution independent. That's how Illustrator works most of the time too. The Illustrator vector graphics are resolution independent, which means you can scale them as big as you want. You could put this on the side of a bus and it would look the same as if you scaled it down. If you took a pixel-based image and put it on the side of a bus, it better be a pretty big lot of pixels, or it's going to look kind of fuzzy and soft. So we're using that SVG. Here's what it actually looks like in Illustrator. So it's just a Mission College logo in black, but these are all vector shapes. These aren't pixels really. I mean, they're pixels on my screen, but they are descriptions of these shapes and letters, so it can scale as big as small as you want. So I can go real small, real big, doesn't matter, and it always looks clean. I just messed that up, didn't I? But anyway, that's what it looks like. When you want to save it out from Illustrator, there's some different ways to do that. You could, one of the easy ways is just go to File and go to Save As and pick an SVG for the file type. SVG is Scalable Vector Graphics. Give it a name, click Save. Well, I don't want to replace anything, but you get the idea, right? And then it will save out as an SVG file. All right, so we're using that. We're also using Google fonts. which allows you to use fonts that are hosted by Google and also licensed for web use. So the way this kind of works, and maybe you've seen this already as well, is if I click on a font, I can see examples of it. If I like it, I can click this little plus. Well, actually, I'm going to go up here, select this font, this little drawer that pops up. And then underneath there is a link that it generates. You just copy and paste. That's kind of small to see for you guys. You kind of copy and paste this link into your web page. And then if you want to use the font, you just use it like any other font. You just put it in your font stack into your CSS. And that's about all there is to it. You can pick different versions of fonts and multiple fonts, and it will generate a different link here. Yeah, so that's how that works mostly, but you probably have seen that already. And if not, you can check it out. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the actual page here. So I'm going to open up this file, final layout start 1. That's probably what yours is called also. I gave you some start files here. Let me get this out of the way. And oh, I need to show you one more stuff. So there are a couple of CSS files that I provided for you. One is the normalized version 8. So normalize is, again, a file that will kind of reset everything and kind of make all the browsers try to look the same. It's called a browser reset or a CSS reset. So that one's in there, and it's already linked to the page, so you don't have to do anything with that. There's also a nav CSS file in there. So this has most of the CSS for the navigation bar, this navigation bar here. It's already linked, so that's why this thing is kind of already working. It's already styled. And there's nothing really in here that's very new to you guys because you've seen this before. We've made some navigation bars. A couple things that might be a little bit different. On the navigation bar itself, it has a z-index of 1,000, and that's in there to make sure that it stays on top. So z-index is kind of the depth. X is horizontal, Y is vertical in the way that you think about space on a website or in a 3D space actually. And then Z, I can't do Z until we get our hologram. Until you get your hologram TV, I get home, I guess. But Z means going towards you or away from you. So z-index 1000 means it's kind of float on top of it'll try to make sure that it floats on top of everything, doesn't go under something when we scroll. Because remember, when we scroll, it's going to be stick at the top. We don't want it to go underneath something because then you can't use it. So that's kind of what that is. The rest of this is pretty familiar probably. One other thing that might be just to mention is the transition here. So on the actual link inside the navigation bar, it says transition all 0.3 seconds and ease. Make that a little bigger. And what that means is as I roll over the links, for anything that changes between the normal state, which is this one, and the hover state, which is this one, which is basically the background color and the color of the text, I think. Actually, it's the same color of text, so that doesn't change. But anything that changes from here to here will animate over 0.3 seconds, and ease is a timing function, so it's just the kind of the speed of it. It kind of slowly speeds up and then slowly speeds down. There's about 8 or 10 of these, but you may have seen these before already too. So if I roll over, instead of just going directly to the new color for the background, it kind of animates in, which is kind of cool. So that's the only really thing in there, so that's why I didn't really have you guys write all this. You're welcome, by the way. It's just linked in there. All right, so back to our main story here. So I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of the sidebar so we have a little more space to see. Maybe move this over here a little bit. And so up at the top, you've got a few things to look at. Here's a meta tag. That's already in your file, start file. This is a tag that will help mobile browsers not mess up the scaling of the page and kind of make it tiny, and you have to pinch and zoom on it. So that is just something that's in there for some mobile browsers. Here's the link to the normalized file. Here's the link to the CSS, the nav CSS file, which I just showed you. And here's the link to the Google Fonts link. I actually had to replace a couple of characters in this because it threw an error when I put it in directly from Google. But I'll let you figure that out on your own if you try a different font sometime or anything. But yeah, it looks clean now. All right, so there's also some basic styles in here. There's some fonts for the body. Since I included Open Sans, which is a font, a Google font, with my Google Fonts here, I can use that on my body. So there's that one. So this is Google Sans on the page, I believe, I hope. Then we've got a wrapper, which we've seen 100 times, maybe 1,000 times. It has maximum and minimum sizes and typical stuff. It's centered as well. Some padding on the heading and the article and the footer. The footer has some color on it. Nothing new here at all. Here's my other font that I'm using, Roboto Condensed, which is this one. I think it's that one. And that's the other Google font that I used. And then it's got some fancy text shadows and some other things on there. But nothing really should be too new here, I don't think. So we're just going to skip down below here. There's some font and link colors and stuff like that. All right, so it says start here. I guess that's where I start, huh? All right. One more thing before we start, I probably should tell you what's on this page here. So again, we have our wrapper, which goes down the whole page here. And then we've got a header, which has an ID of Masthead, so that's up here. We've kind of done something like that before. We're going to put our image in there. That's why there's a broken image icon in there. If I put it in now, it will be gigantic. So before we style it. So that's where our SVG file is going to go. We've got this thing called pod 1. So that's this text here and this text here. It's all in a box. And there's one called tagline, which is this one. And there's one called address, which is this one. So we're going to style all this in a minute. And then below that, we've got our nav. So here's our nav 1 container. That's this stuff. Then we've got our article, which is most of the page. Goes all the way down to there. Inside the article, we've got a section called main content with a couple of columns in it, or a couple of divs that have column IDs on them, like col 1 and col 2. Here's column 2. Very similar to the templates that we've done before, so nothing really new there. Then we've got another section called Flexbox Gallery, which is this stuff, the big images here. Right now they're big because we haven't done any styling, so that's probably the actual size of them. So this is where we're going to do some of that Flexbox stuff. So that's that section there. There are a bunch of divs here, 3 divs for each of these, and we're going to style those little cards in there. And then there's a footer, which you know what that is. All right, I think now we can really get going. All right, so I'm going back up to where it says start here. That's where I should start since I put start there. Okay, so we're going to add a class for responsive images. So remember, responsive images lets you, I probably should spell responsive, right? Even though I'm making it up. Responsive underscore image. And what we're going to do with this is make a class so that we can apply this to images like these so that they won't just be gigantic and they will resize according with our layout. So by default, the image is going to be the size that it actually is, which is this big. I think they're about 600 by 400 right now. And but we want them to fit inside their containers, so that's what we're doing with this. I think you've probably seen this in a video already. So I'm going to say max width, and I'm going to say 100%, and I'm going to say height of auto, which is kind of one way to do responsive images, kind of a simple way. So this is just saying that the images won't get bigger than the full width of their container that they're in, which ends up making them scale. So that's good. All right, so we haven't used that yet, but we will in a second. All right, so let's go below that and style our masthead. This is similar to what we did, I think, in a different video, but we're going to add a couple of tweaks to it. So we're going to say box sizing, border box, and remember that is so that when we add padding and borders and things, it won't change the size of our container. Then we're going to add a height. So we're styling this mobile first, which basically means we're going to style this as if we're going to look at it on a phone first. And you've probably heard this mobile first thing from me before, but again, it means you want to style the simplest way possible for mobile and then add on things for desktop, especially nowadays where more and more people are looking at websites on a device or phone or something, and then maybe they look at it on a desktop, but maybe not. So that's called mobile first. Design for the mobile experience and then go up into desktop. So that's kind of what we're doing. So we're just styling the mobile stuff first, and then we'll add the other stuff on later. So I'm going to say height of 200 pixels for that masthead. And I'm going to say a padding of 0. You guys know what all this stuff is, so we don't have to worry about that. Then we're going to add a positioning of, I'm going to say position relative. And the reason I'm doing that is because we're going to position some stuff inside the masthead. So if you remember from the positioning video, I think there is CSS positioning, I can put stuff where I want in this masthead by positioning, making it position relative or giving a positioning context, and then I can put stuff wherever I want, basically. So we add position relative there. And then I'm going to add just some background stuff. So I'm going to say background color, and let's do FFF. And we're going to add the background image now. So we're going to say background image and URL. And we're going to go inside the IMG folder, which I provided for you, hopefully, if I was cool. And then I'm going to go to Gilmore Center 3, I believe. Yeah, that's it. And I'm going to go over here and refresh. I'm going to have to save this. I'm going to go ahead and save this as start one. I'll call it finished one. That makes sense, right? So that I have my start file in case I want to go back. You'll never go back, probably, but if I could spell finished one. Okay, finished one. Okay, and then we'll preview that. So we're not previewing it. We're looking at the old one. There we go. All right, so now we're looking at the actual preview one. So we added this background image and not much else so far. Okay, so now we're going to say background attachment fixed. So I'm going to say background attachment fixed. And now if I scroll, right, if I scroll, the image does not scroll with it. So everything slides over the top of it, which is kind of cool. But you can only really see it through the masthead, so that's not like it's going to be underneath everything. You can only see it through the container that it's in, which is good. Then we're going to say we don't want it to repeat, so even though it would, there's no space for it to repeat anyway, but we're going to say no. We're going to say background dash repeat and no repeat. So no repeating of you. And then we are going to move this thing around a little bit too. So as we resize the browser, we're going to move that background image around so it kind of fits a little bit better. And yeah, so we're going to say background dash position. And we are going to say left top, which is kind of already where it is, I think, but we're going to change that later. And then we're going to change the background size, or at least put it in here. It may not have any effect right now. Background size, and we're going to go auto and 250 pixels. So that means auto in the height and 250 in the width. Or sorry, that's right. So if I resize here, let's see. Yeah, it's fitting okay. I think it's kind of already showing up that way a little bit, but we'll continue on. All right, so now we're going to style the H1 in here, which we've kind of done that already too, but maybe a little bit different on this one. So masthead H1. That means the H1, which is this guy inside the masthead, right? We're going to do text. Or sorry, font family. And this is where we're going to use one of the fonts that we got. So a single quote and then Roboto, R-O-B-O-T-O, and sans serif. Oops, sans serif. You probably would add more fonts in there to your font stack just for safety, but we're trying to be a little quicker here, so but I probably would add some more fonts in there just to be safe. Okay, so we're going to say text align. We're going to align our text to the right. So now it's gone over to the right up there. We are going to give it a color. So let's say color of FF8F00. It's kind of one of the mission kind of colors. And then we're going to change the font size. So let's go font size of 1.8 EM or EMS. And we're going to add some padding of 0.2 EM. That's just to get it away from moving around just a little bit. We're going to add a text shadow. I know we've kind of done some of this stuff before, but do it again, I guess. 0, 0, 3 pixels, and black on this one. Normally I would do kind of transparent, but we'll save a little bit of time. And then we're going to add a little bit of margin, 0, and then 0.5 EM. So now it's kind of up here on the top right, and it's got a little bit of a drop shadow on it to separate it from the background a little bit. Yeah, I think that is good. Okay, so moving on. So now we're going to style this pod thing, which is this stuff here. And we're going to use a little bit of Flexbox in there, I think. So it's called pod1. It's a class, so I just put .pod1. Let me scroll up a little bit. Make this a tiny bit bigger in case you guys are having trouble seeing it. And so we're going to say box sizing on this one, border box, to make sure that, again, the sizes count the padding in the border. And then we're going to add some padding of 0.8 EM. Now I already worked all this out ahead of time. Oops, 0.8 EM. Obviously I'm not just guessing on these because I already kind of did this and then I'm redoing it with you guys. But yeah, you just kind of have to play with it and get the spacing that you want or go from your comp. But yeah, that's where I'm getting these numbers from, because I already kind of worked it out. I'm going to give it a width of 100%. I think it already is anyway, but just to make sure in case we change it later. And then we're going to do a font on this one. I'm going to use the font shorthand. It's so just font, and then 0.8 EM slash, actually we're going to go REM, which is root EM unit, which means it won't scale, it won't compute a new value if something else outside of it has an EM unit on it. Remember that from long ago? Just means go back to the beginning and start from 0 and then go up. So 0.8 REM and 1 REM. So this is the font size, and this is the leading, or the space between the lines, right? And then we're going to do trebuchet, MS. You could be single quotes or double quotes. I know I did single quotes before, but either one usually works, I think. And then we'll do Arial, comma, Helvetica. If I can spell Helvetica right. Comma, sans serif. All right, that's good. So you see the font has changed up here, the size and spacing and things like that. Okay, also going to mess with it a little bit more. Let's go letter spacing, which is the same as tracking, if you remember that from one of our exercises, I think. So I'm going to say letter spacing, and I'm going to do 0.06 EM, which just spreads the letters out just a tiny bit. You don't want to do it too much because people will think you're a bad typographer. So that's letter spacing. Next, we're going to add color. So we'll say color, and it's going to be white. And then we'll add background color. And this one is going to be RGBA. So this is, we're going to add our little semi-transparent thing. So you do RGBA, remember that? That means red, green, blue, and the A stands for alpha, which is transparency. So we're going to make it black, 0, 0, 0, and then 0.6. So now it's semi-transparent. So that's how we can read it, obviously, and it kind of looks cool. You can see this, still see the image behind it. Okay, so now you can see that it's kind of floating above where we want it. So this is where that positioning thing comes in handy. So I'm going to go position, and I'm going to say absolute. And then now I can position it relative to our masthead. Remember we said position relative on the masthead? So now we can say where we want this to be inside of our masthead. So I want it to be on the bottom. So I'm going to say bottom 0. And now it goes back down to the bottom of our masthead. Kind of what we wanted. Oops, there we go. Let me get rid of this, it's getting confusing. All right, so now it's sitting at the bottom of our masthead, which is where we want it. So there you go, we used a little bit of positioning there, all right. Another thing I'm gonna do is I've decided, which you can make these kind of decisions, right? The UX designer or the designer. I don't wanna see this address when I'm on the phone because the address is actually at the bottom too, and it's just a decision that I made. But you could change your decision, but I'm just gonna show you how to hide it. So we're gonna make this disappear when we're on the mobile phone, but reappear when we're on the desktop. Crazy, right? So if we look down there, there is an ID on that called address 1. So we're gonna style that now. So I'm gonna say pound address 1. And all we're gonna say is display none. And it disappears. So it is a tiny bit of data waste, I guess, because now they're still downloading that code. It's a tiny, tiny bit. They are still downloading that address, and then you're just hiding it. So yeah, a little bit of a penalty as far as data, but very small. But we're gonna show that on the desktop. But now I've just got this thing there only, and it kind of sits down there in the bottom right, which looks pretty good. Okay, so let's go ahead and add our logo in since we are not seeing it right. We're seeing a broken image icon. So I'm going to go over down to where it says image source. It's about line 142, but here's maybe a little different depending on how you just type that stuff. And I'm going to go in there and say image, and then there's my image folder. And then the image is this one, logo mission college black mark SVG. So just click on that and it shows up, and whoa, it's gigantic. It's also see-through. So it's an SVG, so it can have transparency. By default, it is, yeah, that's kind of cool actually. Whoa, make you sick, but that's obviously way too big. But now it's in there, so you can see why I left it out for a minute. So now we're gonna style it, right? So this one has an ID of logo. I already have that on there for you, so we can style it using that selector. So I'm going to say pound logo to style our ID, and then we're going to float it to the left so that I think look down here, our heading went way down there below it. So I'm going to float this to the left so that it can go around it when it's small enough. And then we're going to give it a height of 130 pixels, I think I have. Oh, there it goes. It got small. So that's one of the great things about SVGs is I just resized it. It was basically full screen and it was clean, looked good. But now I resized it down there and it's still clean and looks good. And it's a tiny file. I think it's like 11K or something. So that is one reason to use SVG is because you can scale it however you want. And it doesn't use any more file size or anything. I'm also gonna add a little tiny bit of margin, just tweaking things, of 3 pixels just to get it away from the very edge of our layout there. So now you kind of can see how this logo is kind of sitting up in the sky next to the building. That's kind of why I chose this image, so that it would have some space there kind of for the logo, and then, or for the name Mission College, and then for the logo up there. So it's starting to look pretty good. So what happened to our navigation? I'm not sure yet, but we'll see in a second. Okay, so that is our logo. Let's go down below there and add, start styling our Flexbox Gallery. These are just some start styles. So Flexbox Gallery is this stuff down here. It starts with other ways to learn and ends right before the footer there. So we're going to say Flexbox Gallery, and And just going to add some margin for this. So this is kind of tweaking some of the spacing. I'm going to say 2.5 EM 000. Okay, so you may not have seen anything, but it was a little bit of spacing that we're fixing there. All right, so now we're going to style a div inside of there. So we're going to say Flexbox Gallery, and that's just an ID, right? But now we're going to style the div inside of it. So Flexbox, this means a div that's inside of something with Flexbox Gallery, right? And then we're going to say display block, which it probably already is, but just to be safe there. And then we're going to do box sizing again, border box, and padding of 10. Again, more spacing stuff. Not a lot of change, but maybe some padding stuff. All right. All right, I just hit refresh on my screen and my navigation came back. So it was just a redraw thing. So if you didn't see yours disappear, it was just a glitch on my end somewhere. I didn't do anything, I just hit refresh. Okay, so let's move on here a little bit. So I'm gonna go down below here. It's gonna get a little bit crazy. I'm gonna copy this and paste this. And then we've got div again. So that's the div inside the div, the nested div. So that's the box inside of the box that's inside Flexbox Gallery, which is our main thing that we're gonna do. So if we look down here, now let's look down here actually. So here's our Flexbox Gallery right here, right? And then here's the div that's inside of it. And then here are the 3 little pods. So we're just using, again, descendant selectors to get to the stuff that we need to get to. All right, sorry about the scrolling here, giving you motion sickness. All right, so we've got Flexbox Gallery, div. So we're gonna add a border here. Let's go border to pixel solid. And we're gonna do RGBA again. And the color is black 0.2. So that's this little border here around these guys. We're gonna get a little border radius, remember that one? So that is gonna give us a little bit of a curve. So I'm gonna say border radius of 0.5 EM. So now we get this little curve here on those boxes. Okay, so we're going to align the text in the center. So we'll say text align center. So now the text is in the center of those boxes. Here is the tricky, or the new part, I guess. So we're going to say display flex. And some things will change. So when you say display flex, you're changing the container, whatever's inside the container, you're changing the container into a flex container. By default, a flex container goes sideways. So now you see it took the heading, even though it's a block element, and this is an inline element, and this is another block, this is a paragraph. So we've got, let me make that bigger, heading, image, and paragraph. Normally those would go vertical, right? Because this is a block, this is an inline, and this is another block. But since we said display flex, by default they go sideways. And you'll see why we're even doing this in a minute. But I can change the flex direction. I'm gonna say flex direction and column. And now it's back to a column. I'm gonna say align items, center, which centers everything. So by default, you see it kind of stretched. I think stretch is even yeah, if I go to stretch, you see how it stretched everything to fit? That's what it does by default. So the images got weird and distorted, but if I went to center, now they look normal again. So that's what we did there. I also want everything to start at the top of the box. So one of the good things about Flexbox as well is you can have things start or end wherever you want, kind of at the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's good for aligning things inside of boxes, kind of way, because that's why it's called Flexbox. So we're going to say justify content, and I'm going to say flex start. So what that means is it's going to start the content at the top of the box, and if there's space left at the bottom, that's okay. You can put it, like I said, top, bottom, middle, all kinds of stuff. Check out the video, which I think we probably had on Flexbox, and then the CSS tricks page is good with Flexbox as well. But that's what's going on with that one. Box sizing, border box again. Keep doing that just to be safe with sizing and adding stuff in there. And then I'm going to add margin of 1 EM. That puts some space between those boxes right there, and then 0. So that's 1 on the top and the bottom and 0 on the sides. Okay, I think we are looking pretty good there. All right, so down here, if I show you those images, they are already in there. I already had that responsive image class that we made earlier on there. If I take that out, let's see, I'll take this one out. Let's go on another one down here. How about this one? So here's classic responsive images on this guy right here, right? So if I take that out, see now the image leaks out of the box because it's bigger than the box. So that's why we put that class on there that had the max width of auto, or 100%, sorry. So now they all fit in there. So we're getting there. This is kind of not too bad for this is our mobile layout. I think we're almost done with that part, most of it. All right, so back up to our stuff here. So now, I think we actually are done with this. Is our mobile layout. It kind of doesn't work too well out here, right? Because some things are going weird. This image is stuck in the corner. Yeah, we only have one column here. The line lengths get super long. These get gigantic. So that's why we're going to add some now media queries, which we have done a tiny bit or a decent amount of already. But media queries can have us adjust this page for us so that it looks good when we look at it on the desktop. So you remember how media queries work? We're going to go just put it below there, and we'll say at media. Gotta spell it right. And we'll say screen. And so this is just for screen. And we're going to do min width 576 px. And that means these styles won't work unless we're over 576 pixels wide. So there's tons of ways to do media queries. This is basically at the point of this video anyway, it's kind of a common breakpoint. And so what happens again with media queries is the styles that we put inside of here, they're kind of like nested styles between this opening curly brace and this one, is these styles will only work when the minimum width of our layout is 576. So it means 576 or above. And they will kick into effect. So what we're going to do is kind of move some things around, make 2 columns out of this 1 column thing, make these 3 columns actually, and stuff like that. So, but it's not super hard to do with Flexbox, mostly Flexbox. So we're going to style the main heading, do a little bit of responsive typography, which is changing the text depending on your conditions. You might not need the same size text all the time depending on what's going on. So I'm going to change main heading. I'm going to move it around a little bit. Let's say margin 0.5 EM and 0. And then we're going to change the font size to 2.2 EM. So that's adjusting the main heading, which was this guy right here, I think. Yeah. For desktop. All right. Moving on. So we're going to go down and put a pound main content. if I could spell it. That is the name of our, and don't forget to put your curly braces, right? This is nested styles, basically. So here's all the styles, the media queries. They start there and they end there. This is sort of a nested style, and this is another one. So don't forget to have the right number of these curly braces. So main content is our article, right here. It's most of the, actually it's pretty much everything except for this main heading. So we're going to say main content. We're going to use display flex again. And watch, as soon as I did that one line, when you say display flex, it becomes a flex box, right? A Flexbox container. That means all its direct children, which means anything one level down, which in our case is these two columns, I think. Everything inside of it will become a flex box or a flex container, flex item, and it will go sideways by default. So by default, it already kind of made two columns for us. They're not really straight or anything yet, but we will fix that. So I'm going to go below that and say justify content and space between. So what that does is space out the content that is the leftover space. You'll see it actually after the next style that we add. Now I'm going to add pound call 1, comma, pound call 2. Those are our two columns. This is column 1, and this is column 2. So we can use what's called flex basis to kind of size things. And it's kind of like the starting point. So the whole thing about Flexbox is it's supposed to be flexible. Things can kind of resize if they need to and get bigger and smaller. So flex basis is kind of like, here, start with this. So I'm going to say I want these to be 47%. And now you can see that they're both about 47% of the width of the available space. And this space between puts the extra space that's left over between the items. If I say space around, then it breaks up the space into 3 spaces, 1, 2, and 3. So again, Flexbox is really good at kind of moving things around and spacing things out automatically without you having to do like the old days with Float, where I got to add up everything and I got to put 4 pixels there and 3 pixels there, and it's not going to add up to 100% and blah, blah, blah. That's what's good about Flexbox, is it'll figure it out for you. It does the math for you, basically. All right, so I think that's good. I think those two look pretty good. All right, let's keep going below there. We're still inside of our media query. We're going to do one other media query too, but at a different width. So now we're going to style our nav up here a little bit. So I'm going to say pound nav1 space UL. That's the UL inside of our navigation bar. And we are going to say, we're going to display it as a flex. God, we're using this a lot, huh? Display flex. Look at that, one line, and it automatically took those 4 lines and made them into 1. And then spaced them out evenly. If you did that with floats or some other older method, it would be a while. You'd have to figure out like a 25%, make sure I don't have any extras. Oh, I got padding, now I got to subtract that. Bunch of math, right? So this kind of makes it easy, or can make it easy. I'm going to give it a height of 20 pixels. And I'm going to say align items center. All right, so we got that in there, and I kind of collapsed a little bit. We're going to fix that in a second. So I'm going to go down below that and add, I could have put this first probably, but I'm going to add nav1 and we're going to add a padding to space it back out a little bit. So I'm going to add padding 1 EM. So now it's back to its normal size, and then 0. So we don't want any on the sides. And now we're going to add the position stuff. So we're going to say position sticky. Oh, events, sorry, position sticky. So when you use position sticky, you have to say where you want it to stop. So we want it to stop when it gets to the top. So we're going to say top 0. And let's see if that worked. If I scroll, look at that. So now I scroll, and when this navigation bar gets to where it is at the very top, which is top 0, it stops scrolling. So that's what position sticky does. So it'll stay there. And since it's semi-transparent, you can kind of see through a little bit. It's kind of cool. And then you always have your navigation available. Pretty neat, huh? All right. Okay, so a few more styles for the nav. Sorry, I'm not typing this super clean, but I'm trying to go a little bit quick here. So I'm going to say nav1, ULLI, A, which is the links inside of the navigation. And I'm going to say font size of 1.3 EM and padding of 1 REM. All right, so now you can see that we got what we wanted. We have these navigation buttons that have this little rollover effect that was already in there, right? And then if I resize, it turns into a vertical navigation bar, which we sized already. So we're just adding some styles to make it work the way we want when we're on a desktop. So that's kind of what we're doing. All right, we are getting close here. We want to change the masthead a little bit and tweak some things about moving some items around on the masthead. So I'm going to go down below this style here and say masthead. And I'm going to change the height to 300 pixels. And I'm going to change the background size to auto and 300. So I'm going to say auto and 300 pixels. So we're resizing the background so that it fits a little better when we're on the desktop. You see now when we resize, it changes size, right? So now we're on the phone, it gets a little bit smaller, and we're on the desktop, it gets a little bigger, and it just fits a little better. So you can change how things are positioned at different widths using the media queries, which is kind of what we're doing. I'm going to change the background position to 50% and top. And you'll see why we do that in a minute, but yeah, after we get to the bottom, you'll know why we did that. We always want to have some space here for the logo. So right now there's not, but there will be when I get done here. Okay, so let's go below that and style the H1 this time. So masthead H1. So these are all just tweaks. We're just tweaking stuff for different sizes of devices and monitors and things. So masthead H1, it's kind of way up here at the over on the side, so we're just going to move it a little bit. So we're going to say margin 0 space 40 pixels. And that just moved it over 40 pixels from the edge here, which is all we wanted to do with that. That was just for desktop. Remember our address that we put into the nether ether reaches of a black hole back here? It's gone, right? Remember we said display none like a half an hour ago? We're going to bring it back from the dead. So we're going to say address 1, I think that's what it's called, right? And we had display none. If we change it back to display block, which it was in the first place, it reappears. Nice, so now it's back. But now we've got, they're stacked, right? So we've got to fix that. We don't want them stacked. So here's the address, and then here's the tagline thing. So we got to go down there below that and fix that. So now we're going to style pod 1. Remember, that's the box that it's in. What are we going to use to, what could we use? I don't know. Let's go font size of 1 REM. Makes it a little bigger text when it's on the desktop. And we're going to say line height. I'm going to add a little bit of line height of 1.3 rem. And then we are going to, but we still have those stacked up. So how do we fix that? Let's go display flex. What happens then? Oh, starting to work. Yeah, it did work. So here is Mission College, where today's students meet tomorrow's opportunity. I wrote that myself, by the way. And then here's the address, right? So now they are next to each other instead of on top of each other. So we just did that with that one line again. We want to center everything. So we're going to say justify content center. Kind of already was, I guess, but we'll add that in there. Now we're going to style, make those a little bit, change the width on them so that they are not the full width of the container or up against each other. So we're going to say pod 1. And this is a shorthand, which I'm not really going to get into too much, but because it's a big topic, this is this flex shorthand for shrink and grow and flex basis. So yeah, sorry I threw that in there. Watch the Flexbox video and you'll get more of this one. But this is basically going to say, the gist of this is each one of these is going to be 300 pixels wide now. And now we can add a little bit of space between these two guys. So this thing is called tagline, this text right here. So I'm going to say dot tagline. And we just want a little space on the right. So I'm going to say margin right 1 em, I think. So now there's space there. It says there's a 1 em of space between those. So this is right aligned up to next to it, and then this is left aligned there. Backing up just a tiny bit. I knew there was something wrong there. I was supposed to put a div in there. There we go. I forgot the div. I had it on pod 1, right? So this should say pod 1 space div, and now they're 300 pixels wide. They were still filling up the whole space. But this is the shorthand. This is flex shrink, flex grow, and which we don't have to talk about right now. And this is flex basis, which is which is a fancy way of saying the width. So now I've basically made them 300 pixels wide. A suggested width. It's kind of suggestions with Flexbox, but that kind of works. And then now when we resize, so we get both of those pieces there, right? Both of those pieces of text, and we resize, we get to our breakpoint, and the address disappears, and we still get our tagline. Of course, that was a decision that you made. It was your idea, not mine. So, all right. So we are almost done. So we want to change the height a little bit of the. Oh, that's backwards, isn't it? Good thing I saw that. So we want to change the height. Yeah, that bracket was backwards. We want to change the size of the logo a little bit. So I'm going to say pound logo. And we're going to say a height of 150. And then we are going to go down here. So we still have, these guys are still full width there. So we're going to fix those guys now. So we're going to say Flexbox Gallery, typos here at the end, space div. Those are these three guys. Each one of these is the div inside of the Flexbox. And we're going to say display flex again. Man, we're using this thing a lot. Boom, they went sideways. They're all sideways next to each other because we said display flex on them. There's actually a div inside of each div, and that's what's, so whatever you put the flex on, that becomes the flex container, and then everything inside of it will now be a flex item. So that's what we did. Okay, so, and we want to do, let's go down one line because I can come back and show you what's going to happen there. I'm going to copy this here, paste that, and then one more div. So there's actually a div within a div there, and you can go down and look at it, the code, if you want to pause for a second. but I'm not gonna wait for you. You can always pause, right? And then we're gonna say flex basis right here, and let's do 32%. So then we can go up here and say justify content, and I'm gonna say space between. So what that did was we're telling the boxes to try to be 32% wide, which leaves us what? 32 times 394%. And then space between says take the rest of the space and divide it up between whatever space is left over. So it kind of spaces everything out. You don't have to do any math. Again, it kind of figures it out for you, right? Do we want space between or space around? Let's try around. No, we want space between, I think, because it will go all the way to the edge there. So again, it's kind of pretty cool how it kind of spaces stuff out for you. All right, we are almost done. Whew, all right. So now we want to just resize our H1, masthead H1, this thing a little bit when we're in this position here. So we're going to say pound masthead H1. And let's change the font size to 2.5 EM. So now I got bigger, right? So it gets bigger on the desktop. It makes sense. So we did that. The only thing we want to do now is this image gets in kind of a weird place. Right about, so if I go out to here, it looks fine, right? There's space there. So what I want this image to do, I want this image to be on the left, pinned to the left side until I get somewhere around here. And then it switches back to the center. But I don't want this logo to be over this building because it's hard to read and doesn't look great. So we're going to put in one more little tweak here to our, add one more media query just to fix that. So I'm going to go, so here's the end of our media query that we just did. So I'm going to go below that. So we're in a new media query now. I'm going to say at media screen, and this one's only going to be max width 1170. So until we get to the full width. So I'm going to say max width 1170. 1170 is our max width of our container. So yeah, that's right. And then there. So now we're going to say background position. That's all we're going to change. Left and top. That I messed it up. I got tired at the end, just like you guys are probably tired. I forgot to even put the selector. I got to put masthead here. It's all right. It's a little bit long, but it's worth it, right? I'm going to put masthead, and then I got to put that back in. There we go. Good. So I left out the selector. I just had background position. So we've got at media screen and max width 1170. That means up to 1170. It's going to position our background image at the left and the top, which makes it have this space here so that we can have our logo fit like so. So if I resize, it looks good. It's still stuck over there. There's still space for the logo, but now it goes there. And it resizes. So I think we could have stayed with left the whole time, actually, but there was a reason why we did that, to make it so that it wouldn't leak out and be big enough and stuff like that. All right, I think that is it. So we've got our responsive design. If we resize, our navigation goes to a vertical navigation bar. The header area masthead gets a little bit smaller. If I scroll down, you can see that we have those three little pods that go full width, but then once we resize, they go to 3 in a row. All right, so again, sorry that was a little bit long, but that's kind of a full layout almost from scratch. And I will talk to you again next time.